Welcome to Bonn Park.
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 Bonn Park is supported by Ennio's Pasta House. Ennio's has been providing Waterloo region with the wonders of home-style Italian cooking since 1994. Ennio Renan, a local entrepreneur with a passion for cooking, grew up in northern Italy and arrived in Canada with a dream to open a restaurant. He had 2 pots, 2 pans, a strainer, and a stove. Today, Ennio's Pasta House exists thanks to his tenacity and the loyalty of customers. There are so many flavors to explore at Ennio's, from classic spaghetti and meatballs to Annabella sliced roasted chicken and sweet sun-dried tomatoes tossed in creamy pesto Alfredo sauce with penne. Have we got your attention? If what you've just heard sounds irresistible, check out Ennio's online at enniospasta.ca or order via Uber Eats and skip the dishes. Ennio's is located at 665 Fairway Road South in Kitchener and 384 King Street North in Waterloo. Buen appetito! Bonn Park is supported by Toy Soup, located in the heart of St. Jacobs. Toy Soup is so much more than a traditional toy store. It's a magical place packed with tons of great toys, games, puzzles, puppets, novelties, and mind teasers, and award-winning strategic thinking games for kids and adults of all ages. Since opening Toy Soup in 2006, owners Rob and Lisa Boulain have remained selective in which items they bring into the store, with a discerning eye for toys they feel have good educational value for kids and toddlers. They are truly passionate about play, imagination, and creativity. For Rob and Lisa, it's all about quality as they stock the toys and games they love and have items that you won't see on just any toy shelf. Toy Soup is unique and unlike any toy store you've ever seen, and you can check them out at toysoupcanada.com. Also follow them on Instagram. We are supported by Four Fathers Brewing in Hespeler Village, Cambridge. Four Fathers Brewing was started by 4 hockey dads. Their friendship, like their craft beers, is based on a simple formula. Stand up for each other, stand up for something bigger than yourself, and stand up for the antiquated notion that quality craft beer matters. With a tap room and retail store that always offers a large variety of flagship, seasonal, and scratch beers on tap, there's always something on tap to satisfy everyone's palate. To help everyone stay home safely during COVID times, Four Fathers Brewing is offering free, local, same-day delivery, Monday to Friday, for all beer orders over $35. As well, the kitchen is offering takeout and curbside pickup from Thursday to Sunday. Please check the website at fourfathersbrewing.ca for further information, and follow them on Instagram and Facebook. Cheers! Welcome to Bonn Park. I'm Sara Geidlinger.
And I'm Marshall Ward.
And today we have Matt Morris. Matt is a Waterloo community snow sculptor who has recently launched this snow sculpting online community. It's virtual, and he's got this goal of bringing the art to a wider audience.
And you really have to see his work firsthand to really appreciate the power and presence these pieces have.
Here he is, Matt Morris. Matt Morris, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, it's great to be here, Sarah.
I really appreciate it. I've bugged you for over a year now to come talk to us. So I appreciate you taking the time. You've had a lot of attention lately with CTV News and CBC and the local community.
It's been a busy time where I'm just trying to get the word out about the wonders of non-packing snow. I'm sure we'll spend some time on that today.
We certainly will. So the first time I saw your sculptures, I was driving on Blue Street, and and it was January 2015, I believe. And I personally was going through a life change. My mother was sick. I was changing careers. My husband was changing careers. We were planning a move. You know, all those things that shift in your life that make you a little uncertain of what your ground is. And I was driving down that Blue Street, and I saw your Easter Island, I think Moai sculptures. And I instantly got it, did a loop around, came back, took a photo. It was one of those beautiful, sunny, crisp, almost magical snow, golden winter days. So they were just glistening in the sun with a bright blue sky behind it. And I thought, I don't know who this is, but I'm going to tweet this because I was new to Twitter. And I'm going to say thank you. Whoever made this, thank you for brightening my day and making me remember that this is my city, this is my community, and there's always something beautiful going on. So you really touched me that day. And then you said, oh, that's mine on Twitter. So that's 5 years ago now, or a little bit longer. So from what I understand from looking through a lot of your other work, is the Moai sculpture the first one you do every year?
Yeah, I think I've done this 9 years now on our snowbank here, and I think it's become tradition. I'm pretty sure that every year I always start with a Moai, and I'll just throw in there that I've now switched from Easter Island to Rapa Nui after a discussion with someone on email from Rapa Nui to try and test the whole idea of cultural appropriation and issues like that, and a few other people have connected in a very kind way and helped me understand the whole issue of the naming of the island and such. So I usually call it now a Moai from the island of Rapa Nui, but I can totally understand why people would still think it's Easter Island. But yes, it is the first carve of every year. I guess that's tradition, linking back to how it all started when my wife and I were in a museum many years ago, and we walked around a corner and we almost bumped into one of these massive moais. I think it was probably 15 feet tall. And I just looked at it in awe. And I said to Lorna, my wife, Lorna, you know what? I think we could make one of those on our front lawn next winter, maybe as a joke, and we did. The next winter, we got out there and started rolling snowballs during the packing snow like everybody else. And I'll tell you, getting that second ball and the third ball up on top was a real challenge. But we sort of made three that looked a bit like moais, and that was enough to hook me. And from then on, I continued to learn more about how to sculpt and the wonders of non-packing snow.
How beautiful that there's now, like you said, cultural education brought into what you're doing based on your outreach. People are seeing this everywhere now.
Yeah, and just to explore that a little further, with the moai, at one point years ago, I had a row of four of them, and they were I had them with happy faces because they're usually a pretty stoic look. But I put happy faces on them, and that got me thinking that I should explore this whole issue and understand it better. So I talked to a gentleman who is working hard to try and keep the Rapa Nui language alive, and we had a great conversation. And in the bottom line was he had no issue of me carving a moai, but he said it might be an idea to, if you carve a traditional moai, certainly call it a moai and go for it. But if you feel like you want to carve something else that's different, maybe just don't call them a moai. And so I've tried to stick with that going forward. And we had a really neat discussion about what he's trying to do down there, and there's a nice little twist on what I've focused on there.
Wow.
So what did that first year look like when you started sculpting? Where did you already come at it from a sculpting background? And
No, I worked in business for years in Toronto, and then became a teacher for many years more, and have really no history in sculpting. I'm a business teacher, or was a business teacher in the high school system. Done lots of music. That was, I guess, my main pastime. But when we saw that moai, I said we should try. So when we got out there, one question came up of what the heck are we going to carve this thing with? And my wife happened to have this long knife. It was, you might even think of it as a machete. It's like enormous. And I said, I think that knife would do it. So out I went on the bank. Crazy idea, I guess, in the icy, slippery.
Slipping around with the machete in your hand.
Yeah, and people driving by wondering what's this crazy man doing on his front lawn. But it was a great tool to try and get that shape right. And although it was fun and successful, I wanted to do more. I still remember, though, even that first time out there, I immediately enjoyed the connection with community, and that'll be a theme through this podcast, I'm sure. But the number of conversations I got into with people walking by, or tooting their horn or whatever, it was just a positive community event almost, and that's always been one of the most fun parts of the whole process.
What did you imagine that happening when you started out? Like when Marshall said, you went out there with your machete the first time, and this is your first attempt at sculpting. Did you ever think it would have this type of outreach?
I didn't really consider that at that point. It was more of the
don't die on the snowbank.
Yeah.
And Matt, in that first year, what was the learning curve like with regard to the medium of snow? I imagine every snowfall is a bit different, and every day feels different when you're working with snow. What was that? What was that like when you started out?
Well, a couple observations. One is, unlike many pastimes, we have no idea when it's going to snow, really. We can try and forecast it, but often the forecast will change. So if I had planned to do snow like next weekend, that's impossible. And then all of a sudden the forecast will change, and tomorrow we're getting 20 centimeters. So it's okay, out we go. And as I go out, it's, what kind of snow will there be? And like everyone else, initially I thought packing snow was the only way to go. But I was so intrigued that I started research on the internet and learned about non-packing snow and looked at these professional carvers or world-class carvers who would have these blocks of snow that were 10 feet by 10 feet by 10 feet, and studying how they did that, and the fact that they stomped it all in and then let it sinter is the term, so that the crystals bond together. And some of the light bulbs started to go off in my mind when I realized, oh gosh, non-packing snow in my mind is probably about 80% of the snow we get. So why wait for just the packing snow when I can use all the other snow to great effect? And part of the fun of all this has been to connect with a few world-class carvers on the internet. And I have some good friends now who live in the States and over in Europe. And at one point, a few years ago, my wife and I had the privilege of attending a world-class competition. And that was such a blast for me, because as we arrived, the temperature plummeted to minus 20. And for 3 days, these 5 teams carved away in the minus 20 degrees. And my wife and I were basically the only ones watching. It was so cold. And the carvers, it's a really neat community. And they just took us under their wing. And over those 3 days, I had a crash course in a lot of the tricks of the trade, which really took my sculpting to a new level.
And so when you're talking about learning from these people I would have thought packing snow. I'm not a snow sculptor.
Yeah.
This and the sintering, is this where the pounding tools and all that stuff come in?
Yeah, it's a simple process, and as an old man once told me, it's easy when you know how.
Yeah, of course.
So think of a plywood form, or hey, dial it down to my recommended entry point for kids, which is a simple 5-gallon pail. So we have a 5-gallon pail. We shovel in a bunch of fluffy snow, and then we pack it in with a little tool, which we'll talk about separately. We pound in that snow, and then we fill it again, pound it again. We fill it right to the top of all pounded in snow, and then we leave it for 2 hours to let it sinter. And the idea is, think of packing snow for a second. We never have to let it sinter because it's basically ready to work and sticks together, and that's in warm weather. So if you put it on a graph, the colder it gets, the longer it takes to sinter. So if it's going to be a really cold night, sometimes I'll build one of my 8-foot tall towers of snow in the evening, and then I'll just leave it all night in my big plastic forms to let it sinter all night. And so I wake up in the morning, usually pretty early because it's an exciting day, and I walk out and I peel off the forms, and there's this beautiful 8-foot tower of snow that is just pristine and a beautiful consistent medium for carving. Much more enjoyable actually than packing snow, because it's all been packed in the same way, and it can really take an edge with some of the carving tools I use.
And yeah, because packing snow is kind of, just from childhood experience, it's a little unpredictable. Is that what you're kind of getting at?
Yes, because it may have different densities. Certainly there's some wetness in it. Some of it may have turned to ice and becomes very difficult to carve. Whereas I'll call it dry snow. The non-packing snow is very dry and very predictable. And so you know what you're going to deal with there.
And how are you making decisions about scale? I guess there would have been a lot of trial and error at first, but at some point when you approach this, you're making very deliberate choices about composition and scale.
Or does it start with the $4 lump of clay?
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
The whole, I guess we could generalize that question with what am I going to do out there? one time I was trying to think of what to do, because I'm always thinking of what would be fun and what would people enjoy. And I remember a 3-year-old really wanting a penguin. And I was thinking at the time, penguin, okay, they're cute, but what's the big deal? And as I asked kids, they like, penguins are like amazing. And so I decided to make a penguin. In fact, let's digress a bit. So some of the little kids in my neighborhood love penguins too. And one morning I looked out my front door, and there was a little penguin out of snow on the stoop of our house.
Like left for a gift for you guys.
Yeah, it was like
it's great.
You can buy a little mold, I guess, of a penguin. I said, "Oh my gosh, there's a penguin," and no one would admit to it until a few days later. A couple of the local boys admitted it was them, and so I went out front and made a big penguin, and then the next day I assume it was them, made about 5 more. And so it was my big penguin in the middle with 5 little penguins around the outside. But certainly the audience suggestions play a role. And that's how Baby Yoda came up last year as well. I didn't even know what Baby Yoda was. But so back to your question, Marshall, about scale. For Baby Yoda, a very distinctive shape. And yet I wanted it to be dramatic. So I think I went about 6 feet tall on that one, where the first 4 feet would be, it looked like he was standing on a cut off tree trunk. And then up top was the actual carving. But another time I decided to do a gigantic foot, and that was about 8 feet
1 foot
tall.
of snow. Yeah.
Yeah, 1 foot. I thought that was a good line, 1 foot of snow.
That's great.
And I once did 2 feet of snow up north, but that was a real learning process, because as I created the forms for that, especially when I did it up north, I made the base of the foot way too short. It just looked odd until I finally realized what the shape was, and I had to extend the form. And that I'll mention at this point, back to, you'd alluded to the plasticine, or my model. I guess in the art community they call that a maquette. And I often now will make a maquette in advance of a carving. And you think of something simple like a foot, and actually it's not that simple. And so as I sit watching TV at night, sometimes I'll have some plasticine, and I'll be, I don't know, looking at my foot or my wife's foot and trying to get the maquette right. Because once I go outside, if I have that maquette in my left hand, I can really use it as a reference tool to try and get my final shape more accurate.
Because working on a large scale it's a different monster, right? Different animal, I suppose.
Absolutely, and that's totally new for me. And I'm sure I could learn more by taking a sculpting class, but working with an 8-foot tall tower. And the other aspect, of course, is I've only got a few hours to do this. It's not like I have 3 months to pull off this gigantic sculpture. But having that maquette in my hand and standing well back and using it as a hold it up and eyeball it sort of tool really helps me get a little closer to what I'm after.
And do you see it as a body of work? Like maybe a winter is like an exhibition almost, like where there's a cause and effect, where one piece kind of almost influences and sets up the next. Can you look at your work in that linear kind of way and say, oh, I see how I've grown here and learned?
Absolutely. I remember one year, 2-3 years ago, we connected with Empire Public in my neighborhood, and did a little session with the kids over there. And I realized to give it a little bit of fun, their mascot is the Empire Eagle. And so I've always wanted to challenge myself with different types of carves, and I'd never done an eagle before. And so over I went, and I carved an eagle, and the kids thought it was great. I didn't think it was that great, but it was a start. And then later that season, we ended up at Fairmont Montebello in Quebec, making a number of animals for them. And so it was the first time I'd carved animals of that, or birds of that nature. And we ended up, I think it was we did some penguins, an eagle, a bear, and an owl. We did an owl as well. And certainly pushing myself to create something I haven't done before is a great challenge as well.
You obviously leave some room open to get fun, because all of us were rooting for the Raptors last year. Basketball fans are not. And that spicy pea sculpture was fantastic. And I think he even actually retweeted it, or like he said something like that's cool, bro, or something like that.
Yeah, dope, I think is what he said. Yes.
Oh yeah, that's dope. Yeah, that's what he said. Yeah. It was gorgeous and part of a celebration of something we were all feeling.
Absolutely. Like, hey, I'm a Raptor fan for sure, and I spent a lot of time on the maquette for Pascal. I just did his head, and I wanted to get it pretty close. And then the big trick for that one was to create him on a rotating plywood platform so he could spin, because that is his signature move. And I think the spin, beyond the face looking fairly close to his appearance, I think the spin was really what caught people's attention on that one.
For sure. Yeah.
And Matt, when you're working, like, let's say with animal anatomy, was that not really daunting at first, trying to, capture some kind of realism? But at the same time, I imagine snow is not a friendly medium to any kind of extremities or anything that extends out too far.
Absolutely. And with snow sculpting, there's risk involved. Think of the eagle with the beak, and one wrong move and it falls off. This is, in addition to being a speed craft, I'm a speed carver, I guess. It's also a subtractive art, basically, and you're removing snow the whole time. There are techniques to add snow back in, and I'll be making a video about that very shortly, but it really is subtractive. So being very gentle on the curves and trying to reduce that very slowly is definitely a risk, and part of the fun of trying to get it right.
See, I wasn't thinking of it as subtractive. I certainly think of ice sculpture as subtractive, but I hadn't been thinking that way. So there are actually some real similarities between your snow sculptures and ice sculpting.
Yes, I think I've got a bad attitude towards ice. I somehow I think it's wrong, but I get, part of it is I don't do ice, and part of it is I love the purity and the chance and the ephemeral nature of snow. Like, we never know when this gift from God or from wherever is coming from the skies, and these billions of snowflakes just land, and it's all free and it's open for anyone's use, and away we go, as opposed to ice arrives in the truck in any temperature and use all these noisy power tools. No disrespect to the ice carvers out there, like, they're amazing people and amazing artists, but I've decided to stay in the pure form of snow because I see it so natural, and you never know when it's going to happen.
There has to be, you never know when it's going to happen, and you never know how long it's going to last, right?
Yes.
So there has to be some soul searching life lessons that you've learned along this journey. Like, are you just born the type of person that if your sculpture melts the next day, that was beautiful and it's gone,
Well, in this modern internet age that we have, I guess we're spoiled because we can instantly shoot that picture, so we always have it.
Yeah. You've got a great gallery of your stuff on your website.
Yeah, it's been neat to have that progression on the website of the whole 9 years, and I look back at that occasionally to reflect on where I've come as a in quotes artist. Right back from day one, I look at some of the crude sculptures or the very basic carvings that I did, and I noticed myself getting a little better, and it challenged me to take it to even the next level, for sure.
I liked when you talked about coming out of your house in the morning, and I guess you're seeing your work with fresh eyes. That's always an amazing thing. It's like you have an art studio and you're walking in and seeing how that painting is after a few days not seeing it. It must be full of incredible joy and reward, but also disappointment sometimes.
Well, hey, the other night, was it Sunday was the storm, and I made the moai, and 2 days later he fell over. They don't usually fall, but it was such a catastrophic melt that he actually fell.
Is this the one that was sort of, it melted over this way? Like, it's sort of, I'm doing a motion, listeners, that's my arms in the air and I'm slowly falling towards Marshall.
Yeah, yeah, usually if they're not on the rotator, if they're on the rotator, the plywood rotator, they will definitely fall off because they're not really attached to the ground. But any of my sculptures that are rooted on the grass or in the snowbank will 99% of the time will melt over very slowly and will often go horizontal, or even the top will touch the ground, and that makes for some real hilarity as some people walk by saying, is that plastic or is that snow? And I have to convince them that it is snow. But going out that next morning and see the moai falling over, in some ways, hey, it happens, and we just plan for the next one.
I imagine, when you decorate a Christmas tree out front, one of my favorite things on your front of your house is to kind of go out at night and then come down your street and see it, see the lights and see it from a different vantage point as in, that's what everybody else sees. You must have these great moments where you are out somewhere and you come home and you're seeing your sculpture from a little bit of a different vantage point.
Yeah, neat comment. Like when I drive up the street, I don't mind calling it William Street. Thank you for trying to protect my privacy, but I don't mind saying it's William Street. But yeah, as I drive up the street at night, and it's a nice, crisp, dark night, and there I see my tower and of snow or something I've created. It definitely gives me a new perspective for sure.
And that's a beautiful neighborhood to be doing this type of work. That neighborhood has a lot of history. I think most people who have lived in Waterloo region have some feelings around William and Avondale and Dunbar and that whole central part of Waterloo.
There's so much history here. In fact, our house was built by the Franks Jewelers family.
Oh, wow.
Many, many years ago. So yeah, we love the neighborhood for sure.
And so speaking about the neighborhood, let's get into talking about this new outreach that you've done. So you are now creating a program for local children and also children and adults outside of our city. Talk a little bit about that and what it is you've been up to.
Well, continuing from what we've talked about so far, I'm the guy that sells non-packing snow and the wonders of it. So I know that there's this whole world of snow that people are not taking advantage of. I also, like all your listeners, I listen to the press, and I have my up days and down days through this COVID. Like, it's a terrible time. And you think of the kids and how they can't see some of their friends, and their programs have been canceled for those that do programs. And school is so different. And if we can give another option to families, or even adults, I'll say, people who are on Zoom all day, they need a break. They need something different. If we can get the word out on this option, it might give people something to look forward to in the winter. And so I started this online virtual snow sculpting club. And with that, I made a bunch of snow pounders. I alluded earlier to the fact that the snow has to be pounded into the pail. And so I made over 80 snow pounders. I call it the QP 7000, just for fun. And I handed out over 70 to families in my neighborhood. And we did that very carefully, at socially distanced on a couple of handout days. And because I wanted to provide a tool to kind of get them started. I also put plans online for this very simple tool. It's basically a little piece of plywood attached to a 2-foot stick to pound it in. But the plans are online if anyone wants to make one that's perfect for a pail, because I do want to get the word out, not just to my local community, but to anyone, anywhere. And I'll digress. I've been starting to get emails from parents in various locations. We have members now in Toronto and Peel and Durham and Montreal, Philadelphia and Alaska. And I got an email just yesterday from Port Severn, was it, up near Bonn Park?
Yeah.
Anyway, so the mother sent a picture of her daughter hugging badge number 3. I have a badge system that goes with it. And the look on this kid's face of pride as she hugs her badge number 3, and then a separate picture of the little girl coloring the badges before she, as she cut them out and was going to glue them to her certificate.
Wow.
And it was just really neat to see people starting to connect. So that's the idea with the club, to get everyone doing this and building and maybe making pounders and getting the word out that non-packing snow is your friend.
This must be invigorating in terms of there's a real physicality, from what I can tell talking to you, about putting snow together. It involves, I imagine, your hand and your fist and your foot and your knee and using your whole body. Is that right, Matt?
I'll tell you that the snowstorm day was it Sunday, I guess. That was a full-on exercise for me. I had started this club in the summer and launched it in the fall. I didn't start in the summer. I designed it in the summer, launched in the fall, but I knew I needed some support videos to help people figure out some of these basic skills. So as soon as that snowstorm hit, I spent the whole morning filming in my backyard, and those are all up on the internet now. And then in the afternoon, I wanted to build my first moai. So by the time I went to bed that night, I was pretty tired. But the physicality is definitely, it's a great workout. Think of it. It's a great workout. I'm working with a free medium. I get to be outside, and I have awesome conversations with people as they go by. Like what a perfect opportunity to relax and rebuild and reset.
And you're offering also, like, you really have to give credit to this part of it. You're offering a skill and a community and an education program to kids and adults who are lacking that right now, as you said, with a free, like, they just need this pounder. And I'm pretty sure you don't have to go down to the local hardware store to find these things. If you dig around your house or your neighborhood, you could probably find some of this stuff if you were not able to purchase it. In a time when, like you said, school's really different for kids. They're not getting out of it what they used to. It's a lot of information being sort of pounded into them at one time because they need to get that curriculum done. What a beautiful thing that you're doing to offer this. It's like you're a Santa Claus.
Well, hey, I do note on the website that this whole activity meets the core desires of the Ontario art curriculum and probably outdoor ed and physical education. It's I think all the pieces are there for people. And I'll link to what you just said about the pounder. It is definitely a piece of wood stuck on a stick, but you don't even need a pounder. Using your mittens, and in my videos I show how this can be done, just pounding the snow in with your mittens. So the cost is very minimal. I also will mention that Nick and Nat was very kind enough from her restaurant group to give me some pails and from their restaurants. And I did test recently. Most restaurants have square pails for some of the products that they use. And I wanted to test to see if a square pail could be released, and it does work. So if people can't find a pail or can't afford one, then definitely get to a restaurant. Most restaurants will be happy to give you a free pail. So think of no pounder really required, free pails. The cost is pretty zero.
That's a beautiful thing. Did you notice on this, with all these tools that you have out there and the advice, so this last snowstorm, did you notice any sculptures around your neighborhood from the community?
Actually, my wife and I went for a walk, and I'll tell you one story. We walked around the corner and down the street, and from a distance we saw some sort of structures on some lawns, and so we walked towards it. And it was a really fun moment for me because there on the one lawn was my snow pounder, my little red snow pounder. I guess someone had picked it up. But there were four lawns in the area, and they had made a couple. It looks like they had made a couple of my badges, but more importantly, they clearly had then just moved on to their own pure creativity, and they'd made these wonderful forts and contraptions and integrated sticks, and so they were all at school, I guess, but I had this vision of four families of kids like in close to each other, enjoying the outdoors and probably yelling things at each other as they socially distanced, building on their own front lawns.
Kind of what we did when we were kids.
Exactly. Pure play is, I think many have talked about how that's what's missing. And to see kids involved in pure play was very satisfying for me.
I appreciate the word play, but I would think that what you're doing is also at times about persevering in the face of near constant frustration. There must be some bad days or some just for whatever reason, like any artist, like the medium just isn't working for you, or structurally you just can't figure out why it's just not going to work.
That's totally true. And I guess in the earlier days, I used to do some testing, I'll call it, in my backyard if I wanted to try something new. Like I remember back when I was trying to figure out how to carve a human face, and I had zero history with sculpture, and getting the curve of the teeth was a big issue for me. And so my backyard sort of the risk-free zone as opposed to the front yard, which is more performance. But even in the front yard, to get your question, Marshall, sometimes things go bad, and I'm okay with that. Hey, I spent many years as a teacher, and for people to see me have a good failure in the front yard is totally fine.
When you talk about sculpting a face, are there things that you inherently already somehow knew when you started, or did you have to learn things? So if you think about the human head, a lot of people don't realize that the eyes are halfway down, right? Like if a lot of people will draw a face, and the problem is the eyes are too far up. They're up where the eyebrows are. But if you look at the human head as like a globe, the eyes are actually at the equator, right? The top of your head's at the North Pole and your chin's at the south. But a lot of people don't realize this until somebody shows them, or you read an anatomy book. Did you already have some inherent idea of how to sculpt faces when you started?
Absolutely zero. I would say I'm definitely a visual learner, so my radar is always up. But as I started, and I had the curiosity and the desire to learn some of these skills, I did find myself staring at people's faces much more intently to understand, how's the curve of that nose work, or how does that cheek blend into the rest of the face. And your comment about eyes, absolutely. And I've referenced teeth. For me, I used to do teeth just straight across. And when I realized that, like, they curve into the mouth, and then figuring out how to carve that, that was a big breakthrough for me. And when you see something all of a sudden work properly, that is a totally fun moment.
Very rewarding, I imagine. It's funny, you said something there about staring at people, and well, you said something about noticing this feature on other people. As a photographer, that's something that's going to get me punched in the face one day. You know, I am constantly staring at the people in our community and how the light touches their face and different times of the day, and have to pull myself away sometimes because staring isn't polite, you know.
Yes.
I'm just constantly doing it, and I can't turn it off. It's been that way since the first time I held a camera.
Well, there's so much to learn.
Yeah, there is.
Matt, is there a base that you start with? Like when you step outside and here you are, you have a lawn full of snow. Is there something fundamental that you have to do to set the stage for what you're about to build?
Or is it always on the spinny platform?
No, it depends what I'm after, but that's a very important point. Even if you're only starting with the pale structure, it has to have a solid base. So, for example, when my moai fell over, or whenever any of my sculptures fall over, I very quickly get the shovel out, I chop it up, and I throw it on the base and then pound it down. So that right now there's a bit of a flat base. I have a curve to my lawn, but now I have a flat base of snow. I'm gonna look out the window. Well, it's probably gone now. It's probably green grass again. But normally I make that flat surface so that it's ready for next time. Especially if I have the rotating platform, I'll make it as flat as I can, and I'll actually get a 4-foot level and put it on the base to make sure that I am somewhat level, because if I get that wrong, then it's going to start to bend quite quickly. Now, sometimes I want it to bend quickly, in which case I'll just build it on a bit of an angle. Oops, I apologize for that phone ringing there. But yeah, having that base is pretty crucial.
So if you build a sculpture, and let's say it's a minus 15 degree day, nice cold day, the next day, let's say it's the same kind of day, can you see little shifts that are happening as it starts to, for lack of a better word, erode or come apart, I guess? Or have you seen it where you build the sculpture and for 4 days straight, this thing is perfectly solid and being preserved? Or do you see little shifts already happening the moment you finish?
Excellent questions. Wow, this podcast is cool. Like most of my press is like 5 or 6 minutes, and here we're really getting into it. A couple comments that might be helpful. Number one is, when I'm building something, even if it's 20 below, I often will only have this big sweater on that my wife knit for me, and because it's hard work, it's physical, and the sweat is pouring because it's really working hard. Once I go inside to let that snow sinter for a few hours, then go back out, or maybe the next day, I have to dress completely differently. Fresh clothes, as much wool as possible, many layers, because with carving, you're just standing there. And for anyone carving in the cold, you are not going to have fun pretty quickly if you're not dressed properly. Now, your other part, though, as far as how these things evolve, part of that depends on the path of the sun. And I find that as the sun moves over the back of most of my sculptures, evaporation plays a role in taking away some of the snow and some of the detail from the side closest to the sun. And I feel that in addition to the initial position of the tower, how vertical is it, that evaporation and removal of some of the snow from part of the sculpture can have an effect on not only the detail that shows or starts to fade away, but how the tower might start leaning. Usually it's on the back and side. I rarely have it on the, if I'm facing the street.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the west there because I know where you are on the street. No, I know you said the street.
The sun, as the sun goes to set, when we get into golden hour with long shadows, that's a great time for photos because the sun just starts to touch the face.
So sorry, did you say you're compensating for that, or are you just sort of dealing with it as the melt happens?
There's not a lot I can do. I let nature take its course. So I probably think of the sun path for sure as I'm aiming something, but most of the aim has to be towards the street. Sometimes I guess people driving up the street will get a better view because I'll have aimed the head down the street.
Right.
And Matt, how much are you moving around? What I mean is, how often are you walking across the street to take a look at it from a different vantage point? I imagine you treat it kind of like, you have a 20, 30 foot radius that you kind of step back and come back in, back and forth?
I'll tell you, stepping back is something I've learned is a must be. I'm sure real sculptors would support this, but stepping back and taking a look at it, whether it be just eyeballing it or holding my maquette in one hand to compare, is really critical. And if you don't do that, what will happen is one of the eyes will be a little too high or a little too wide, or your eyes will be too low if you're not standing back. So in my videos that I've just posted, that is one of the themes that I continually mention, standing back.
Matt, make no mistake, you are a real sculptor. Yeah.
Okay,
like, what do you mean? I think you have maybe what we always talk about, which is imposter syndrome.
How have you documented your pieces? What I mean is, there must be times of the day where you have a beautiful blue sky behind it and shadow. I'm sure you're taking into consideration. But are you very deliberately photographing these pieces in a way that you want them looking at their very best?
Definitely, and the shadow thing plays a role. Lighting at night, because I do lighting at night, plays a role. And hey, I grew up with film, and now that we're digital, I guess I'm spoiled. I shoot lots of film. Jason Panda, my teaching friend from KCI, taught me some photography, and I'm learning how to do things like shoot on the angle and things like that. So it's photography is an art form that I've got lots to learn about.
Hey, if Jason Panda's listening, I knew Jason in university, and he is one of the sweetest, nicest men I've ever met, and I haven't seen him in 20 years.
Wow.
I'm going to have to send him a note on this podcast. And hey, let's mention at the same time that he's also an incredible artist. And just out of the blue one day came and said, Matt, I'd like to make you a logo. And he knew I wanted a logo for Snowbank Productions, and created this just awesome logo that he then cut on his laser cutter. Just incredible.
And I think there's he did a mural recently, on glass in Uptown Waterloo.
Yes, tessellations are his big thing, and he beside the button factory on the driveway there is one of his creations, and he also did a garage door behind the Home Hardware, and he's definitely and all his chalk work with his students at KCI at the Grand River Hospital. He is absolutely a lead community artist.
When I heard that he was an art teacher at KCI, I thought, oh, Mr. Panda, the students are going to absolutely love him.
Absolutely.
Okay, back to you.
Well, while we're talking about artists, I do want to take a second because I can see this sweater that your wife knit you on your profile pic. So what's your wife's name?
Lorna.
Lorna. So this is the orange and brown sweater that you wear out when you're out there pounding and getting everything ready?
Yes, she is. She's a serious knitter and a leader within the KW Knitters Guild. Let's put a plug in for them too. They've gone virtual, by the way, and
wonderful.
They're getting a lot of people from all over connecting to listen in on some of the amazing speakers that they've brought in. But yeah, Lorna's sweaters and hats and mitts and socks definitely keep me warm in the winter.
So I want to get back to talking about the carving tools. So the machete, of course, caught my attention. Side note, when I was a teenager, my dad had 3 teenage daughters at the same time, and he used to keep one in our car. So it would be, it was a Jeep Wagoneer with the wood walls, and there was a machete it was a little dull, but it was still there in between the seat and the console that we could grab if we ever needed it. I never touched it because it scared me. But so
Right.
you start with this machete-like knife. And what are you using now? What tools are you using now to carve? Is it, a ladle from the kitchen? Have you invested in real carving tools? What is it?
A car window scraper?
Maybe.
Yes. Yeah. No. Hey, and I encourage people to try new things. Like I'm experimenting. When I hung out with those pro carvers, I did learn a few tricks. For example, the grapefruit knife, which is serrated on both sides and bent,
Right.
is a fantastic tool for detail of maybe getting the eyes right and such. A drywall knife for carving out the nostrils, but with a warning that it's incredibly dangerous. Big hand saws for big shapes is awesome. Snow choppers for removing lots of material. What else do we have? I've made lots of tools out of old vent pipe and wrapped them around sticks. But really, it's an evolving thing. You're always looking for what's the next tool that's going to help me create the right shape.
And then just want to go back to your safe zone, the risk-free backyard. This is
Yes.
kind of like your artist sketchbook. This is where you're trying out life-size or full-size versions of your maquettes. And are you photographing that and documenting that also?
Usually, yes. I think it's important, full disclosure, to document some of the failures because they're great failures. The one I'll mention is last winter, I think. In the backyard, I was attempting to use my new snow form, which is I'll call it the wall form, and it's a slightly curved set of forms in the shape of a wall that was about 5 feet high and 4 feet wide. I was attempting to make a wall. It would take less snow to get more viewable space. And so I made it, and it was fantastic. It was such fun. And I put little candles in it and did all this carving. And luckily, as I was filming, the whole thing fell on me, candles and all. And it was such a dramatic, it's all on my website there if you want to see it. But it was such a dramatic failure, and yet so cool that the snow wall worked. So we've used it a couple of times, and I definitely want to use it more this coming winter. But I've also adjusted it so that I can now go, I think it's 6'4" high, and as long as I want, because it's basically a sliding wall form. And that is, I think, going to be a lot of fun for more surface carving of who knows what. I think there is a few time lapses of some of my older. Before I moved to plastic forms, I had big plywood forms, and that's been a whole evolution on its own. But I think I got a few time lapses on my YouTube channel.
Okay, I'll have to check that out.
I was gonna say, I think a last question I have for Matt here has to do with the impermanence of it. You must find great beauty and satisfaction in the impermanence of this white snow sculpture, which is such a contrast to, let's say, bronze sculpture, which we don't know how long bronze will last. Some of Timothy Schmaltz's bronze pieces in town may be around 1,000 years from now, but you know exactly that yours won't be. Have you given a lot of thought to that idea that you create and then it's gone forever?
Well, I guess the first observation is I just focus on, I've got my picture. This was all free. What a privilege to be able to attempt sculptures out of these massive blocks of snow. I remember walking through the old yellow factory down by the train station when, I don't know if he's still there, but Tim Schmaltz was in that building. I used to go visit Salis Marine that makes the life jackets.
Is that the old Beamer box factory?
I think it is.
Yeah.
And he was in there throwing mud on this big wall, and he was. We got into a discussion. He was going to ship it off to China to get forged or whatever they call that, and just to think, man, what an amazing studio, and he's throwing all this mud at the wall, and to some degree, that's the closest I get to it with snow. Like I have this privilege of working with giant snow blocks, and at no cost, and knowing that the next snow is just around the corner.
Something I realized in speaking to Matt, Sarah, is I've never in my life referred to snow as a gift. I don't enjoy winter. I've always felt that I don't belong in this climate.
I hear this from my husband a lot too.
But I don't enjoy shoveling. I just want, all through winter, I dream of the deck and being able to have my lawn furniture out again. But
and I kind of slow down, and I wish everyone would appreciate it because it is short.
Right. Well, talking to Matt has really kind of changed my thinking for the moment, anyways.
That's good. That's good.
Hey, and Marshall, if you're out there on a crisp night, starry night, and you're dressed appropriately, and you're out for a walk, and the city is silent, I think you'd probably agree that that's a pretty nice situation.
Yeah, I don't doubt you've created some magical moments there, Matt, for everybody.
So where can everybody find you?
Go on the internet and type one word, Snowbank Productions, and that will get you to my website. And through the website, there's the whole run of all my sculptures. There's also a button for Snow Sculpting Club. And there's a link to the 8 badges that you can do if you want, but that's certainly not required. And if you want to join at any age, any location, if you want to join the Snow Sculpting Club, we would welcome you. We don't take names. We want to respect privacy, especially since there's lots of kids involved. And just get out there and have some fun this winter.
Hey all, thanks for meeting us in Bonn Park. Please like, rate, and subscribe to our podcast on the platform that you're listening to. And follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Bonn Park Podcast. Original music by Alan Lung.